Hello, SHRM family. Welcome to another edition of the Workplace Tech Spotlight. My name is Guillermo Corea, Managing Director of SHRM Labs, SHRM's Workplace Innovation Lab. I'm your host for this series where we shine a spotlight on some of the most interesting future of work topics, innovators, and disruptive technologies. Before we get started, just a couple of quick announcements. For those SHRM members out there who are not aware of the launch of the Workplace Tech Community, please make sure that you join us. Please visit workplacetechcommunity.shrm.org. This is a great resource that's available to SHRM members. Think of this as the TripAdvisor for HR tech. Also, for those of you watching on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, please share this live stream and tag SHRM. You can also use the hashtags SHRM Labs and Workplace Tech. So for going on to today's topic, right? Retention and the candidate experience continue to be critical issues for many organizations, and using the right hiring assessment approach is a highly effective way to tackle these issues. Over the past number of years, companies have faced numerous challenges to ensure a great candidate experience. From video interviews to chatbots to assessments, the game is changing for employers to provide a seamless and positive experience to their candidates. Talent Board President Kevin Grossman explained that job seekers were more sympathetic toward employers struggling with an unprecedented set of challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic over the last couple of years. But candidate resentment never really went away based on their recent candidate research report. Communication is certainly lacking, and 1/3 of candidates in 2022 reported that not hearing back from employers 2 months after they applied. Only 58% of them said that they received an automated thank you message after applying. And most shocking is that just 7% of them said they'd been notified that they didn't get the job. And by the way, this extends beyond just the candidate experience. What about once the employee's hired? What does that experience impact their impression of the company as a whole? And how, essentially, how can technology help improve this experience and drive down turnover? So joining us to talk about this very important topic today is Scott Mondore, managing partner and founder at Hutrics. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the stage. And before we get talking about this hot topic, maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself. And Hutrics, you're certainly no stranger to the HR world, so welcome.
Hey, Guillermo, it's good to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited. A little bit about me. I'm definitely not a stranger to HR or SHRM. Actually published 3 books with SHRM, and you're on assessments and analytics over the past, I think, about 12 years. So that's exciting. I've got a background, a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. So I've been doing this work for about 25 years. The past 15 years, I've been a founder and entrepreneur. So I kind of started working at big companies and doing assessments and analytics for them, companies like UPS and Maersk, and then went out on my own in about 2008. I actually built and founded, built and sold 3 different HR technology and assessment related companies in the past 15 years. So it's been exciting, whether it was in employee surveys or, selection and skill development type assessment work. So I've been doing this for a while. When we looked at starting Hutrics, not too long ago, last year, we, just the issues you just mentioned, Guillermo, that were what we were trying to solve for. I mean, there's obviously a lot of hiring assessment tools out there that folks can use. But, the ghosting, not letting candidates know anything, or, if they didn't get the job or even the onboarding piece is something that organizations still struggle with. So, what we wanted to do was fix some of those issues and also adverse impact. So, our technology is set up to where not only if you don't get hired, do you get kind of the automated nice email. We wanted it to be something a little bit more than that. So actually, when you take the assessments and you don't get the job, you actually get developmental feedback on how you did on your assessments and what you can do to improve as a leader. And then we give you kind of about a year's worth of digital coaching where you're getting follow-up emails from the company with case studies, learning tidbits, things like that, just so that there's not only is there not any ghosting, but you actually are building a relationship with somebody, even though you didn't hire them for that job. They can always come back and apply again, and it's automated, so the recruiters don't have to do that. And then obviously, the piece around onboarding, offering onboarding coaching and things of that nature is really important. So, there's opportunity here in the assessment space, particularly on hiring, to move beyond, like you said, just the chat bots and the video interview, but really providing good developmental feedback, even for the hiring manager. So not just using it as a test of should you hire the person or not, but if you do hire them, the hiring manager should get some feedback on here's what you should do on day one to make this person as effective as possible. So we solve for that, and then obviously solving for the adverse impact issue. That's a big deal where we wonder why we have so many diversity problems, or if we're shutting out candidates right from the get-go, we've got to fix that. So making sure that there's no adverse impact in the assessments is not something everybody focuses on, but they certainly should. And it was a priority for us when we started the organization.
Fantastic. Excellent. And obviously, a great point to say, hey, companies, should build that relationship, right? But let's get right into it, right? So retention and the candidate experience, right? Two key issues as we've just been discussing, right? That organizations deal with on a daily basis, and they're exacerbated by the organization's own hiring process. So can you please elaborate a little bit on this for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, you've got a couple of things. One is you can predict with a lot of accuracy, and ours are about 96% accuracy. You can predict if somebody's going to leave the organization using hiring assessments. You can't just use one tool. You've got to get the full view of the individual. So things like personality, experiences, are they a good fit with the culture, situational judgment, cognitive ability that doesn't have adverse impact. You really want to make sure that as you do this, that you've got assessments that predict those things so that you can say, okay, we're bringing in leaders who not only aren't going to leave, but they have the skills to make sure that their people don't leave, which is pretty important. The other piece is poor onboarding. A lot of folks leave in those first few months of an organization, and we wonder why they do when all they get is kind of here's the bathroom, and if you run out of staples, here's where the closet is to get your office supplies, and here's your benefits package, right? And it's not really true onboarding where we're assimilating them into the culture, we're doing proper introductions in the organization, we're getting them on the right meetings and the right committees and all this other stuff. It seems to be something that's forgotten. Like once we get them hired, they're passed on to the hiring manager, and then that's it. And so offering up and being able to really make sure that that's a process that is hardwired in the organization, that it's followed by everybody, is where you eliminate that turnover problem early on. Because we know how costly that 6 months to a year turnover is. You spend a lot of money training and assimilating, and then what happens? They leave shortly thereafter. So those are some things that you want to look for. But on the assessment side in particular, when you get the full view of the individual and you've done your validation work, or your vendor has done that, they should be able to show you and do some ROI studies to really prove out that, this is working, your turnover is coming down, and here's how using these assessments to screen out people who would leave versus those who wouldn't is really going to maximize the impact of what you're doing.
Got it. So what would you say, outside of what you just mentioned, what are some of the key elements driving the issues around retention and the candidate experience, right? Is it tools that are biased, or tools that don't really work? Maybe elaborate about the hiring, of leaders and the managers, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of organizations don't even use any kind of assessments, let alone not valid ones, right? So a lot of companies will still do that unstructured interview. They kind of pass the candidate around the office to 5 or 6 different individuals. They all kind of do their unstructured interview, and then they come back together, and it's who did they like the best. And there's over 100 years of research in our field that shows that that's about as effective as flipping a coin, right? And we wonder why we have such turnover issues. And so, a couple of things that you can do right out of the gates to improve your process is, number one, use structured interviews, right? build one properly or hire somebody to help you build it that's based on competencies, whether you're hiring a nurse manager, or a CEO, have a structured interview in place. That's probably the easiest and most straightforward way to improve your hiring process immediately. Now, change management is important too. A lot of managers think they have the magic question that's going to tell them everything that they need to know about a candidate, their favorite color, what kind of tree they want to be, and we know that those just don't work. So having good, solid structure is important. But the change management piece of convincing leaders to use your structured interview guide to make sure that it's hardwired into the culture and that you're actually making hiring decisions using those is going to be important. The second thing is the adverse impact part, where no matter what you use, please ask and get from the vendor their validation report and really scrutinize that to make sure that, number one, you're not putting yourself and your organization in legal jeopardy. You certainly don't want that, but you also want to be fair to all of your candidates no matter what, right? And if they are biased or have adverse impact, number one, it's horrible for the candidate, completely unfair. They may get a visit from the EEOC. So definitely the right thing to do, but also obviously we want a diverse workforce. If you're shutting out candidates early on in the process, then that's going to make that almost impossible. So just make sure that there is very stringent adverse impact studies. Now you'll notice people will throw around the word like AI, artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of new litigation and legislation, especially coming out of New York, where you have to, if you have any type of algorithms or artificial intelligence, you actually have to prove that it doesn't have adverse impact. So it's not just that, well, if you get caught, then you get your hand slapped. It's you have to prove up front that it doesn't have that type of adverse impact. So that's really important as well. The other thing is, whether it's the candidate experience or the retention, is when you do an assessment, make sure it's not just a grade on did this person score well enough to move on to the next phase or get hired. Make sure that you're providing not only the hiring manager, but also the new hire developmental recommendations. So whatever vendor you use, they should provide developmental recommendations based on the assessment. So not just a green, yellow, or red score, but if it's green, yellow, or red, here's all the things that as a new hire they should be doing on day one to help them assimilate and be successful and not turn over. But also to the hiring manager, here's what you can do to help that individual on day one to be as successful as possible. So that's what we do, is we put those in there. But that's important, that it's not just a test and then it goes into a filing cabinet. It's a useful document that you can use as soon as that person is hired to switch it to leadership development or individual development right out of the gates, and not something that's forgotten about. And then obviously the candidate experience, where even if you don't get the job, right, have something where that's easy for recruiters, that it automatically sends out the, here's some feedback on your assessments. You didn't get this role, but visit us again, come see our job board, and we'll send you monthly emails with leadership, development recommendations, tips, books to read, whatever it is. And again, they didn't get the job. We know that's not their preferred outcome, but it doesn't leave a bad taste in their mouth. And that's some things that you want to make sure that you're doing as part of the process.
Yeah, and you're building, once again, you're building that relationship. Quick question around, since you brought up the hiring managers, right? Quick question around that. Based on your experience and all the data that you've looked at, right? Mm-hmm. Would you say that hiring managers are not prepared when they get into an interview, right? Because I've had a lot of conversations with HR folks, at the SHRM conferences and everything, where HR does all the necessary work, and then the hiring manager comes in and they are not prepared. Is your data saying that?
Yeah. So in two ways, it's a good question. Is number one, on the interview side. So nobody is if you use an unstructured interview, it doesn't matter if you've interviewed one person or a million people, you're not going to do a good job, because you're not going to pull out the necessary information from the candidate to make the right decision and see if they actually have the competencies to do the job, right? So that's number one, is they're ill prepared because they're not either using the structured interview guide that they've been giving, or they don't have one, or they haven't been trained on how to use it. So to your point, they are minimally prepared going in. So they're already in a losing battle if they're not doing the structured approach. And a lot of companies, like I said, still don't do that. The second thing is, and this is important for them to understand, is we've done a lot of onboarding surveys where, you know, that new hired person takes a survey at the 30-day point, the 60-day, the 90-day. And one of the questions that we ask about is what kind of expectations? So are we meeting your expectations that you were promised in the interview process? And what hiring managers will do is if they really need somebody to fill a role, we'll start painting a rosier picture than what is actually reality for an individual. Oh yeah, we have plenty of work-life balance or plenty of career development or whatever. And then the reality is very different. So instead of giving them a realistic job preview, they kind of paint a much rosier picture and set high expectations. And then as soon as those expectations aren't met, there's a ton of research that says people leave and leave very quickly. So that's why measuring culture and values fit as part of your hiring assessments is going to help your hiring manager not have to guess if somebody's a good fit. You can objectively and use actual data where you ask a candidate, how much do you value these, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 elements of culture? And then you can actually match that up with the organization and what they actually deliver. So if you were to ask a candidate, how much do you value work-life balance? Well, you could actually look at the organization's employee survey data and see, do you actually do well at work-life balance in this organization? And if there's a misfit or a mismatch between the candidate who really wants it and you don't do a very good job, two things. It's going to, come up as a red flag in our assessment, but it'll give the hiring manager an opportunity to ask questions about, well, what is your expectation about work-life balance? What's the accommodation going to be? And then it might be something very easy. And then you go from there and you can fix that in the interview process. Or if you hire that person, make that easy accommodation right out of the gates. But if you don't know that, then it's going to be impossible because trying to measure fit is very, very subjective. It's tough to glean from an interview. And so the more objectivity you can use, like survey data, asking candidates what their expectations are, is going to be extremely important. But again, putting some objectivity around it, I'm kind of a data nerd. I like to have numbers and data, not just guess at fit. There are ways, and we have it in our platform to really help you make that objective as possible, and then use it in your interview and in your onboarding to make sure that it's not an issue that pops up as a mismatch.
One quick question around that, right? Because a lot of our members, are SMBs, right? And so what do you tell those small organizations? Because obviously it's important, right, to get the right person in, especially for a small business, right? What are some of the things that they could do in that regard?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely, if you're a small business, HR department of 1 or 2 or just a handful, definitely the structured interview guide is kind of that easy way to go where you can get it built, you can use it, it will help you. On the tech side, which you really want to focus on, and it's tough for small organizations, but like for us, we thrive on helping the small businesses because you can just do one assessment, right? You don't have to sign the big contract or whatever. But what you want to find are a couple of things. One is make sure you're not just buying a one-off assessment online, and then just kind of using that. Try to get something where it's very comprehensive, where you're hitting things like personality and experiences and fit and things like that. But if you're just doing kind of that one-off, be very careful because you're only getting one piece of the puzzle. Right. So if you want to kind of build it out, it's comprehensive assessment on the front end where you can just buy them one at a time, where you don't have to buy 100 licenses or whatever. You want to look for something like that because that can cripple a company in terms of the budget. And then you don't use anything, you walk away. So where you can get a one-off, but then also, make sure that you actually use it. You don't kind of get it and say, well, but I really like this person. They're number one and we're a small company, really got to fit this role. We really got to fill it now. Don't make that mistake because hiring the wrong person is going to be way more detrimental than waiting and having that job be open maybe another month and using it right and getting the right candidate in there. So again, comprehensive view, not just do a one-off assessment like just a personality assessment or just this. Get a comprehensive view. Use your structured interview guides no matter what. Get that in place. And then again, actually use the assessments. But that's where the change management comes in, convincing your hiring managers to actually use it and listen to what it's saying, especially if it's got a high level of validity. It'll help you to screen out poor candidates, but also elevate candidates who are definitely a good fit, have the right skill set, et cetera.
Fantastic. Excellent. We're at the top of the hour here for, this short period of time, but one last quick question for you. And this is something I love asking, anyone that comes on this show, and what's one big trend that you think it's going to manifest itself in 2023?
Well, I think it's already manifested itself as the kind of the AI, the Chat GPT stuff that's out there.
Great, right?
I mean, it's hitting so hard, but we were like, well, what are we supposed to do with all this? This is, again, where there's some garbage in, garbage out that you want to be careful of. Algorithms are not all seeing, all being, always correct, right? And you want to be careful and use the classics, right? I keep saying structured interview. Yeah, it's super boring, but it works, right? So if you're thinking about using that kind of stuff, be careful. Again, garbage in, garbage out. If you have vendors saying that they are using it, even more important to get the validation report, get the New York validation report that says that, that new legislation, which you should take a look at. And I've got some paper, I can even send it to you, where it gives a little bit more deeper dive, but you just want to be careful and not just try it out, just to try it out. You're talking about people's livelihoods. You're talking about potential discrimination and adverse impact, which will definitely be there. It has to be accounted for. It has to be fixed first before we start using this, full bore. That would be my big caution. So let's look at it. Let's definitely scrutinize it. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm saying we don't know yet, right? So let's not, just dive into it head first. We can study it. We can figure out if it works or if there's pieces of it that do work over others. That's what I would be very careful about, because that legislation is real. It can affect you in a very negative way in your job candidate. So just be careful and do the right thing for all your people, whether you're using assessments internally for leadership development or your job candidate. It's the right thing to do to make sure that we're not carrying adverse impact with these assessments.
Okay, fantastic. Excellent. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott. It's been a great conversation, and to everyone else out there, we hope that all of you enjoyed it. If you'd like more information on Hutrics, please visit them at hutrics.com, and that's spelled HUTRICS.com. Once again, thank you all for joining and tuning into the SHRM Labs Workplace Tech Spotlight. If you enjoyed this live stream, please share it using the hashtag SHRM Labs, Workplace Tech, and SHRM, and visit us at shrmlabs.com to stay up to date. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. All right. Have a great